Hello, and welcome to the PEEEEEEW instructions for how to construct a proper paragraph. If you are watching this and you are a Miss Bright student, you're my student, then I expect that you should also have open this guy right here that you have downloaded off today's agenda. So what I'll need you to do is to pause the video every time we go from one step to another and follow these instructions where you highlight and bold the keywords that you think are important and paraphrase the step that I'm asking you to do here. As I take you through these steps in this keynote that I'm about to start in just a second, you're going to see that we will be writing a paragraph together. This paragraph that's on the keynote is the very same as this paragraph right here. I will be color coding it with you. So in order to help yourself understand, you need to pause the video and do the color coding with me so that this is done in the end. And that lets me know that you paid attention to the video and that you understand the parts of the paragraph that I'm talking about. Okay? Okay. All right. So let's talk about disrespecting a writing assignment. When ever students are given a writing assignment from me, they often have this same expression of on their face because they're like, oh gosh, you mean really I have to write? And so I'm going to give you permission to give every assignment that you have from me and from any other teacher from now on the ultimate sign of disrespect. So, several years ago, my daughter convinced me to allow her grandmother to purchase her a bird for her birthday. We named the bird Sweetie, and she was a cockatiel that looked much like the bird that you see here that I snagged off the internet. That's not really Sweetie, but they look almost the same. Well, Sweetie was a female bird because we could just tell by the way that she acted that, no offense to us ladies, she had some female tendencies. She could hold a grudge, and she was happy to exact revenge when you least expected it. So we taught Sweetie to poo-poo on a piece of paper so that you could play with her for as long as you wished. Well, actually for about 15 minutes before she would accidentally poo on you. So we would hold her over a piece of paper and go, poo-poo, Sweetie, poo-poo, poo-poo, and she would poop. She would be sitting on our finger and she would poop on a napkin. Then we would throw the napkin in the trash can, and we were happy because this girl, me, I don't want bird feces anywhere in my home. So I was kind of adamant that nobody have Sweetie out of the cage unless they demanded that she poo first. Well, the story turns into the ultimate sign of disrespect when my daughter, for some weird reason, put her on my husband's head. Well, my husband didn't like the bird, and the bird had made it clear in past instances that she did not like my husband either. So I noticed over the side of the room that Sweetie had kind of cocked her head to the side, and she looked like she was concentrating, much in the same way that we would watch her concentrate when we ask her to poo on demand. And so I did one of those kind of slow motion, no, but I was too late. Yep, Sweetie pooped on his head on purpose. And so, as I was trying to clean the poop out of my husband's hair and was really accidentally, with the Clorox wipe, achieving more of a like smeared around kind of effect than I was getting it cleaned out, my husband says with gritted teeth, that is the ultimate sign of disrespect. So, this is Sweetie inspired. Every time I ask you to do a paragraph, I'm going to ask you to, sorry for the 6th grade humor, pee on it. And it's going to be a really long pee. The kind of pee that makes you think like once you finally get to a gas station after you have been riding for 45 minutes and you were afraid that there was going to be nowhere to pee on a long trip and you're like, whoo, like glad that's over. So we're going to call it pee-woo. If you will apply these steps to every paragraph, your writing will improve by leaps and bounds. And thanks to Sweetie, it will be really easy to remember what to do. So the first thing that you're going to do is offer your reader a preview. You don't want to be that guy that comes up to somebody out of the blue and just starts talking as if you're in the middle of a conversation and you have absolutely no idea what the person is talking about. Instead, you want to have at least one key word or phrase that signals what the paragraph is going to be about, because the paragraph should be about one central idea. So, let's pretend we are writing, if you are writing for a constructed response, your preview sentence will be oh so very easy because you will rewrite the question as your first sentence. and include the author's name and title in your response. Like, for example, if the question was, how does the author use symbol to establish his purpose? Well, your two key words are going to be symbol and purpose, because that's what your paragraph is going to be about anyway. So your preview would be something like this, including the author's name and the title. In his story, The Three Little Pigs, I'm making up this author, I don't know who really wrote it, Stinky Mick Stinkerson uses the wolf as a symbol to establish his keyword, purposes about the dangers of greed. So you always need a preview that lets your reader know where in the world you're going with this paragraph. So let's pretend that we are writing a paragraph about whether or not vaping is a safe alternative to cigarettes for teens. So your preview sentence would be something like this. Many teens believe that vaping is a safer alternative to cigarette smoke, but recent studies show vaping poses many dangers to the teenage consumer especially. So what do you think my key words would be? My entire paragraph is going to be about whether it is a safe alternative, see those words in my question, and talk about how it poses many dangers. So those are my key words that let my reader know. So pause the video and fill in the boxes for your preview chart. Okay, so the next thing that you're going to do is give an example. Now, this is almost a no-brainer, even though some students never think to do it. If you're going to prove a point, you got to give me some facts, some sort of something that's going to let my reader know that I'm just not making all this up. You can't expect your reader to take your word for it. So the more specific you are, the better. In fact, it's good to take a quote from, especially if you're doing a constructed response for the state, for your EOC, it has to be a quote. If you're writing a research paper, at least be specific. And if you use a quote, I'm going to teach you how to use those quotation marks correctly in a lesson on ties later. And you'll want to cite your source. We'll talk more about that later. So after you give that example, you can't just assume that your reader knows exactly why you're telling them this. You've got to do them a favor and explain what it is that example gives them, what information that they need to know. And your explanation should directly support the thesis of your entire paper if you are writing this as a paragraph in a paper trying to prove one certain thing. You should at least write 2 sentences to explain what it is that you have given as an example and how it is that shows that your preview sentence is correct. So let's look at an example here. So remember that our topic sentence, our preview, was that teens may believe that vaping is a safer alternative to cigarette smoke, but recent studies show that vaping poses many dangers to the teenage consumer especially. I need to give an example of how that vaping poses dangers. So my example is, remember, I need to be specific. One concern is that vapes are marketed to teens specifically with flavors like unicorn poop and bubblegum. I'm not kidding. Unicorn poop. Okay, whatever. These teen-targeted flavors add additional toxins to the smoking experience. Professor of Pediatrics at the University of California, San Francisco, and lead researcher Mark Rubenstein notes that when these liquids are heated to a vapor, cancerous toxic compounds are formed in the highest quantities in fruit-flavored options. This added danger may thereby make vaping even more toxic to a teen who chooses the flavored e-cigarette than it is for the adult who attempts to switch to vaping as a pathway to end his or her nicotine addiction. So let's think for a minute about what I'm doing. Where is my specific example? Well, sometimes your examples and your explanation kind of run together, and that's okay. And you don't necessarily have to give your example and then explain it. What I have done in this paragraph is led up to my example with a little bit of explanation. So my example is that fruit-flavored options have the highest amount of toxic compounds. And so that would be my example. I explain it a little bit before and a little bit after. The order doesn't necessarily matter. What matters is that you have a preview, which we could also call a promise sentence, because it's kind of like, okay, here's what I'm going to prove, which is another P. But anyway, you're going to promise what you're going to prove in your preview, and then you're going to give an example that shows that promise is true, and then you need to give your reader enough of a courtesy to explain what it is that's going on. So what we have in this paragraph is our preview, that's in green, a little bit of explanation, our example, and then we have some more explanation. Making sense so far? Pause the video and fill in the chart for your next 3 E's, which will just be 2 boxes. That will be example and explain. So, one example is not enough. Oh no. If you, your girlfriend, gentlemen, if your girlfriend asks you why it is that you wanted to date her, and you went, well, let's see, I like your hair, she would not be satisfied. She wants you to tell her that you love her sense of humor and her intelligence and the quirky way that she always chews on her straws at McDonald's, or I don't know what else. But you need to make up, not make up, let me back up. You need to have several examples as to why she is the lady of your dreams. Same way in a paper. One example is not enough to prove your point. So when you're going to give that second example, you need to insert a transitional word like furthermore, or however, or therefore, to let your reader know that you're going to a second example, that you're about to tell them something more. So, after you give that transitional word, you need to continue to be specific and do the very same thing that you did before. If you use a quote, you need to use quotation marks correctly. I'll show you how later, and cite your source. Same way, we have an example in our first one. You have to explain it. You got to have an example in your second one, and you need to explain it again. So same bullet points as before. Don't assume your reader knows why you're telling them. Your explanation should directly support what you're trying to prove in your paper or the paragraph, and you should have at least 2 sentences minimum of explanation that can come before or after your example. So let's continue our sample paragraph. Here is our transitional word. Remember, we said that this added danger may thereby make vaping more toxic. I'm reading the second blue sentence. To a teen who chooses the flavored e-cigarette than it is for the adult who attempts to switch to vaping as a pathway to end his or her nicotine addiction. Here's my transitional word. However, many teens believe that because some vapes do not contain nicotine, it is a safer alternative to smoking. So, here's my next, that's kind of explain it, where I'm introducing my second example. Here's my second example in pink. Yet studies have shown that most teens are not opting for the vapes without nicotine, and significantly, the urine of those who use vapes without nicotine still have significant levels of toxic compounds present in their urine. So I'm saying pretty much that this shows that nicotine or not, the vapes are not safe because you've got toxic compounds in your pee. Here's the rest of my explanation is in white. This research clearly shows that it's misleading for a teen to believe that vaping is safe. Now I'm going to make a comparison. To dance on the edge of a 100-foot cliff and celebrate the fact that the cliff is not 200 feet tall is similar logic of any teen who claims the rite of passage to vaping just because it's not perceived as toxic as the cigarettes of their parents' generation. So, altogether, I have a little bit of explanation, an example, some more explanation that leads to my second example, and then I explain it some more. So really the gist of this is that you need 2 clear examples and that you need to thoroughly explain them to tell your reader what they need to do with this information. So pause the video and fill in the notes for your second example and your second explain it sentences. All right, we are only 1 sentence away from being done with our paragraph. And yes, it will be a good 8 sentences long. I do not appreciate being fed paragraphs that are as nourishing as a McDonald's Happy Meal burger, like, really thin. I want like the hearty $6 burger that's going to make me need a flip-top head to eat it, to get a good bite and digest it. I want a nice, fat, and happy paragraph. So the very last thing that we need to do is the W, which stands for woo, because you're glad that P is over. You're going to wrap it up. All right, so in your wrap it up, you need to wrap up the point of your paragraph. Well, how do you do that? This is prime time if you're writing a paper to support the thesis or the main promise that you made in your paper. If you're just writing a paragraph, you need to say something original. So think about what your 2 examples have in common and say something about that. So let's look back at our paragraph. By the way, typically do not end your paragraph in another example or in a quotation. It just kind of leaves it hanging like you never finished your thought. So our two examples that you see in pink are that number 1, when the liquids are heated to a vapor, it causes toxins. Number 2, that even if you don't have nicotine, there's still toxins. Well, let's think. Obviously, what these two examples have in common is that vaping is toxic, which means it's poisonous. So if I just said vaping is poisonous, yeah, it would tell what my examples have in common, but it wouldn't be very original. So I came up with something like this. Thinking about how dangerous it is, I said the fact that vaping is touted by many to be the new, safer teen rebellion may be the reason it is a dangerous fad. It is indeed a dangerous fad. So I'm thinking, yeah, it's dangerous, and thinking about how it's even more dangerous because it's not seen as a danger, which something that you don't know is dangerous is more dangerous than something that you don't, because then you don't know to stay away from it. But that is my wrap it up. So essentially, pause the video and take your notes on your wrap it up. Okay, so essentially, you've got 8 sentences-ish in any order that you want, as long as your E's make sense in the middle. You got to start with a preview and have your W at the end. We had explanation, example, explanation, explanation, example, explanation, and then we wrapped it up. Or you could say, in this pattern, you have the preview, you give your example, you explain it for 2 sentences, you give your example, you explain it for 2 sentences, and then you wrap it up. Or you could, as in this example, give some explanation, drop the mic with an example, give another example, explain it, and wrap it up. So it doesn't matter what order your E's are in, as long as you have all 6 sentences and they make sense. Sometimes it just doesn't make sense to give an example before you explain it a little bit. If you will follow these PEEEEEEW writing steps, not only will you glory in disrespecting the writing assignment without the teacher ever knowing it, but I promise you, you will become a much better writer. And we all have Sweetie to thank.